When you change your life, it isn't to become the new you, it's to become the real you, the one of a kind diamond that will never exist again and can never be replaced. Everything that's happened to you, all the choices you've made until now, all the ways you've tried to cope, it all matters. It's all useful. You don't have to throw everything out and start from scratch. Whatever you've done, it's brought you this far to this moment. The ultimate key to freedom is to keep becoming who you truly are. Welcome to Unleashing Happiness. I am your host, Cecilia Hendricks, and this week I'm going to share with you 4 of my absolute favorite books. Last week, I made a comment about, hey, if you want some book recommendations, shoot me an email and I'll send them over to you. And I was surprised at the amount of requests that I got, so I figured I'll do a podcast episode that is talking about 4 of my favorite books. And the best part is that when I was going through and going back over the books to pull out some quotes and things I wanted to talk about each one, I realized that part of the theme across all of them is learning how to become the best version of yourself. It's not about denying pieces of who you are. It's not about, throwing everything out, even though I say you have to die to your old self and become your new self. It's really about becoming the true version of you, the one that accepts who you are as a human being, loves yourself, and truly understands the way that you feel and act so that you can actually live a life that you enjoy, so that you can manage your emotions, you can manage your moods, you can manage your reactions, and have a life that you truly love. One of the biggest keys to that is understanding your own reactions to events that don't go the way that you would like them to go. We will all be faced with events that are just not what we want, right? External events where either somebody behaves in a way that we don't like, or we have something happen to us that we don't like. And your reactions to those events are such a key part to you enjoying or not enjoying your life. Folks who fly off the handle, can't control their anger, completely rage, or completely spiral into nothing ever works out for me, I knew this was going to happen, really do end up struggling with their personal emotions and being able to regulate how they feel. Whereas you have others who tend to have more resilience towards these type of events. And this type of resilience can actually be learned. It's not to say that some aren't naturally a little bit better at it, but it is something that you can improve. And when I went back through my books, I realized that, oh man, these 4 that I'm talking about all have a very common theme of becoming your actual true self and stepping into understanding your emotions, not denying them, understanding your moods, understanding your reactions to events. One of the authors I'm going to talk about today, I'm not talking about this specific book. It was from her book, The Choice, Embrace the Possible. She had a comment about how we are all victimized in life. Something happens to us on some sort of level that we are victimized, either by another person, by society, our job. Something happens, our parents, right? We're all victimized in some sort of way. Your reaction to those events and how you view yourself after those, such as continuing to view yourself as a victim instead of someone who has been victimized, is actually a choice. And once you're aware of something and you continue to go back to it, you are making a choice. And sometimes that can feel very heavy, and it's not supposed to. The biggest part of this too is to make sure that there is some self-forgiveness. This is all about learning about yourself, leaning into curiosity. I find that most times when you really look at why am I behaving this way, it's out of fear. It's fear of being rejected. It's fear of failure. It's fear of being abandoned. As you're starting to pay more attention to your reactions, it allows you to understand the cues and the triggers that send you down sort of a spiraling path. And then you can set up tools to make sure that not only do you know that you're doing it, but you have ways to pull yourself out of it. And that's how you become more emotionally intelligent, is to say, yes, I'm feeling this way, and it's okay to feel this way. There's no bad feelings. There's just feelings. There's reactions to the victimization or the event that you're having in your life. It was really neat to see that the common thread between some of my favorite books all leans into understanding yourself, stepping into being the true version of you so that you can actually love your life and love you, because we are all remarkable. I really hope that sometimes when you hear me say this, that you realize just how much I truly believe that we are all such special snowflakes. We truly are. There's no one in the world who has your same thoughts, feelings, perceptions, nothing. Like the experiences that you have that brought you to this moment right now that you're listening to this podcast is amazing. Like the fact that how you grew up and the things that you've overcome and the feelings that you have and the victimization that you've had to deal with in your own life and the viewpoints that you have and the insight that you can give others is all absolutely remarkable. We all are made up of all these different parts, and there's a book that talks about that quite a bit that I'm going to share today. But we all have these different parts that make us us. And there's no one in the world that's like you. Even if you're a twin, you still have experiences and a perception that is different from your twin. Like, it's just absolutely amazing when you truly think about it. You and I could be sitting right next to each other, looking at the same thing, and our perceptions are still different. Like we could be looking at a tree and you could be paying attention to the way that the bark is, or maybe the roots coming out of the ground. And I could be paying attention to how the wind is blowing through the leaves. And even if we both changed our viewpoints to look at the same thing, we still have different perceptions. We're still seeing it differently. And not just because I need glasses, right? It's also because just the way that we view things is so drastically different. Even just on the smallest scale of the fact that we would not be standing in the same spot. We're not the same height. Our eyes are not at the same level. We always have a different perspective than anybody else in the world. And that is so freaking amazing. It really is. It kind of blows my mind the more that I think about it. But as I've leaned into this content and helping others and allowing people to learn how they can actually shape their own life into something that they truly enjoy, what I have found is that it all comes down to moods, right? And Neville Goddard talks about this a lot, your inner conversations, the mental diet that you're keeping. It all comes together to what you're doing inside your mind. How are you dealing with external forces? How are you dealing with things that you don't like? How are you able to regulate your own emotions when you feel like you're going to spiral? And I will say that as someone who really struggled for a long time with kind of going through thoughts that I could not get to stop, my mind is always going. I have conversations in my mind. I'm thinking about 10 things at a time. I'm thinking about my grocery list, if I need to clean out my fridge, what calls I need to make later, if I'm going to the gym, etc. My mind is always, always going. And one of the things that I realized a few years ago is that it was always going about things that were not going right. And even beyond that, it would be mental arguments with others. I was always mentally practicing for things to go wrong and never mentally practicing for the things that would go right. And that was not serving me. That was creating where my mind was like, oh, let me confirm that back to you. Confirmation bias is a real thing. And the more that you tell yourself something, the more that you're going to get that reflected back into life. And I realized this with my fear of heights. For many, many years, I convinced myself that I was absolutely terrified of heights. I wouldn't even climb up a ladder, right? Like it just terrified me. And I even had moments where others would try to help me, like, hey, you're fine. You don't have an issue. Like we did this Muck Fest thing here once in Denver. And part of it was going up like a net, right? So you would go up this net to the top and then back down. It was truly not even that high in looking back, like in hindsight. And there was no way that I could really fall through the net. Like I would have to put effort into falling, right? Like I would have to really try to actually fall. And I was terrified going up this thing. And my husband was like trying to give me just some encouraging words. And I like snapped really bad at him because I'm like, you don't understand. I'm so terrified. And I continued to confirm this to myself for years of how scared I was of heights. And I decided about a year or two ago that I was like, I'm not going to tell myself this story anymore. I'm not going to continue to tell myself that I'm so afraid of heights that I can barely do anything. And so I stopped. Now, am I still cautious? Yes. I don't have the fear of heights. I climb up a ladder, no problem. I can go out on the roof to do work if needed, not an issue. And I don't think you understand how debilitating. I couldn't even move before, but I just stopped confirming this story to myself and my mind's like, oh no, we're okay. We're still going to be careful. I don't want to fall off the roof. I don't want to fall off of a ladder. So I'm still careful. But I stopped telling myself that story. As a matter of fact, we recently went to Waterworld here in Denver as well. And one of my favorite rides, you have to go up these stairs, and the line is always long. So you end up being on these stairs for quite a while, and you have to go up pretty high. I don't know how many floors it is, but it's pretty high. And so I would always be terrified on these stairs, like white knuckled holding on to the edge, like, oh my gosh, trying not to look over the side. And I realized the last time that we were there that I was up there with no problem. It didn't bother me at all. I was like looking over the edge. I was watching other people. I was just kind of hanging out. It really did not bother me anymore. And I realized that my mind was confirming to me my absolute debilitating fear of heights, and that I was able to shift that belief. I didn't have to hold on to that belief anymore. Your perception is one of the most amazing things that you have control over. You can actually shift your perception of any kind of event, anything that's happening to you. And that was a really cool theme to see across all of these books. So the books that I'm going to be going over and that I highly recommend today, the first one is More Yourself. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. It's written by Sarah Waters. Absolutely amazing book. I believe she has another book that's in the works now. I will leave the links to all of these books down below, and I'm going to talk about each one of them a little bit more. The second book is Atomic Habits. So this one is very widely known. I think James Clear did a really good job with the book. So Atomic Habits is the second one. Then we're going to do Feeling is the Secret by Neville Goddard. So this is probably one of my favorite Neville Goddard books. It can be a little difficult to understand at first. So hopefully I can shed some light on kind of what the purpose is of the book. It's very short. I don't know how many pages it is, but it is not a long book, but it is very impactful. And then the other one is The Gift by Edith Eger. That book is absolutely amazing. I read her book, The Choice, Embrace the Possible. That was a phenomenal book in itself. And then a friend of mine gifted me The Gift. And it is one of the best books. I actually bought 3 more versions of it to give out to some people in my life because it's so important and so impactful to me. And I was a little jelly because those books have 2 more chapters written in them. And so it's like, is it bad form if I read those 2 chapters before I gift the book? I hope not, because I'm going to do it because I was so excited about these. And I thought it was so neat that she added 2 more chapters. So I think the new one has 14 lessons to save your life, whereas the edition that I have is 12 lessons to save your life. The first book that I'm going to start talking about is More Yourself by Sarah Waters. If you read the description, it starts with, when was the last time you remember feeling like yourself? And I go a little bit further as we're talking about this amazing book to really ask if you actually know yourself. Do you know the things that are important to you? Do you know your own personal sense of identity? Do you know how to look within and understand what you're feeling and the reasons maybe that you're feeling that way? Can you recognize when there's a part of you that's bubbling up and creating defensiveness or anger or some sort of fear reaction? In the book, Sarah talks a lot about the different parts that make up you as a person. And we all have these different parts, right? And part of learning more about yourself is understanding these parts and recognizing when they're bubbling up. Sarah talks quite a bit about the self, and she says self is the consciousness able to observe the behaviors and characteristics of the parts. Self is your core identity. She continues to say, if you believe as I do that all people are inherently good, then self is the embodiment of this. Self contains and emits all the best qualities of leadership. These are known in the IFS world, which IFS is internal family systems. These are known in the IFS world as the 8 C's: calm, confidence, courage, creativity, connection, compassion, clarity, and her favorite, and honestly my favorite, curiosity. When we have unobscured access to these 8 qualities, we are able to say with sincerity, I feel so much like myself. I will say that I am very fortunate to know Sarah personally. And I say fortunate because she's just one of those people that feels like sunshine to be around, but she's also her actual authentic self. So that does not mean that she doesn't have bad days or that she doesn't have times that she's overwhelmed and maybe behaves in ways that she would prefer she doesn't behave. And she talks about that a lot in the book. She shares very personal stories and stories of when maybe she did things that, somebody had to come to her and talk about their personal boundary within how she was behaving. And so she does allow you to see not only the ways that you can learn more about yourself, lean into the person that you are, but she talks a lot about her own personal story so that you know that you're not alone. The book is written very much so how Sarah talks, and I mean that in the most positive way. It's a very easy to read book. It feels like you're sitting down talking with her and being able to have a conversation with a friend that allows you to have personal growth. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a fantastic book. One of my personal favorite parts of the book is she's talking about Mr. Rogers and the fact that in the movie about Mr. Rogers, Tom Hanks has a moment that he is being interviewed by a journalist, and this journalist had some daddy issues. And the journalist makes a comment to Mr. Rogers about how it must have been hard for his kids to have him as a father. And Sarah mentions that would not be a good thing to hear. Like, I can tell you, she says it in the book, I can tell you from my experience, if somebody made the comment to me that it must have been hard for my kids to have me as a mother, I would be offended. Like, it would create a trigger reaction in me. But he actually takes a step back and realizes that everyone has a right to their own feelings, and feelings are never bad because each feeling comes from your own perspective. We each have a world filter that we're bringing in our own perspectives, and that's what we're pushing back out. Our reactions is based off of our personal perception. What we say and what we do is based off of our personal perception, which is why sometimes you have to consider that the way that somebody is behaving has truly nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. The same way that you react to something, the way that you respond has everything to do with you and nothing to do with them. Now, I know that you might be thinking, because I was when I first started reading about this and understanding it a little bit more, it's like, no, this is about them. They were rude. Okay, but if you look at it with a lens of empathy, why are they being rude? What perception do they have? What victimization in their history do they have that is creating this behavior? And what if you looked at their behavior as just a reaction to their own life events and saw it from a lens of, man, that's really too bad that they're behaving this way. I know that they've been hurt in the past. You can actually open your mind to other people's behaviors when you come at it with a frame of empathy. Now, although I'm not going to get into it in this episode, that does not mean that you have to accept bad behavior. You can still have boundaries to say, this is not something I'm going to continue to accept. And actually, if you want to read a really good chapter on boundaries and setting personal healthy boundaries, Sarah's book actually goes into that in great detail. It's a fantastic chapter, and I think one that everybody should read because she talks about not only talking about your boundaries, but also receiving the information from somebody else's boundaries without being defensive. But I'm going to continue on here about everyone has the right to their own feelings and feelings are never bad. She goes on to say, could you imagine how much the social climate in our world would change if we all started to approach conversations more like that? The increase in compassion would shock the whole system. It would be such a lovely reset button if, for one day, everyone in the world decided to function from the dual mentalities that all things are neutral and nothing is personal. Maybe it's worth a try. The shift starts within each of us. As you strive to curate the life and livelihood you most desire, practice considering that everything is neutral and nothing is personal. See what happens when you start making these changes from the inside in your perceptions and the meanings you assign. Now, we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, and I absolutely love that quote in this book because your perception and the meaning that you assign to events truly matters. And when you look at everything as neutral, which is actually something that is taught in A Course in Miracles as well, that everything is neutral and we assign the meaning to it. Take a look at like a text message that you may receive. Let's say somebody sends you something that says, okay, period. And you read that as, oh, no, you didn't. I cannot believe that you just responded to me just okay. The other person might just be like trying to quickly make sure that they respond to you and mean nothing by it. Somebody else may read it and be like, oh, okay, they said okay, everything's great. When you truly stop and think about it, there is nothing in the world that has meaning until you assign the meaning. That's why one person can be offended by something and another is not. That's why one person can view something from a completely different lens than you do. One person can read a quote and feel very motivated. The other one can read that quote and feel like it's a personal attack. Everything is your perception. So imagine spending some time not assigning the meaning right away from the like knee-jerk reaction, but stop and consider, this is neutral. What is my perception on this? Needless to say, it is a phenomenal book. I definitely recommend you getting it. It really teaches you how to accept more of who you are and also understand the parts of you and recognize when those parts are flaring up and maybe understand how to control those parts a little bit more, how to recognize that they're there, hear them, right? So that you can quiet them, because usually when they're being loud, it's because they need some attention, and then move forward within your own emotional intelligence and emotional regulation to react the way that you want to any external event in life. And as we're talking about perception of self, I'm going to actually transition into talking about Feeling is the Secret by Neville Goddard. So Neville Goddard is a mystic. He's got a ton of lectures online. The books are online that you can actually read for free, or you can purchase them off Amazon. I'm going to leave the link to the free version online down below. What I love about this website is that you can read the chapter and listen to it on the same website. I found that really helpful. Neville Goddard's readings can be a little difficult to understand at first. I found them very difficult to understand, but I found that it was helpful to listen and then read the chapter, or read and then listen to the chapter. Putting those two together definitely helped me out quite a bit. But Neville's teachings are that we are always the things that we assume. An assumption is done through faith, right? So he has the law of assumption, that essentially what I believe is true, the dominant feeling, is what is going to project to me in my life. And I have found that there are practical ways to tie law of assumption principles to our daily lives, right? The way that we're looking. And it all comes to perception, your identity, what you believe true of yourself, and your emotional reactions to external events. Because one of the quotes that I love from Feeling is the Secret is that he says, "You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe this is the only reason you do not see it. To seek on the outside for that which you do not feel you are is to seek in vain, for we never find that which we want. We only find that which we are." And if we think about today's version of like science and showing how our brain works, even talking about confirmation bias, this makes a lot of sense. You are only going to see to the own level of your consciousness. You're only going to perceive the things that you have allowed your mind to be open to actually perceive. And that means external events, because it starts within, because everything's going to go through your life filter. Everything's going to come to you through your own perception in the way that you see the world, the ways that people behave, the ways that you're treated, the opportunity that you're given. Everything is coming through your own personal filter. And our brains are designed to filter out the things that do not conform for us. Right? That's one of the things that definitely I think Neville Goddard talks a lot about, but in a different way. You can actually change the things that you're picking up on by changing your internal belief. If you believe that you are loved and desired, and I mean truly believe, not just that you repeat it to yourself like a robot, but you truly believe that you are loved and desired, you are attractive, you're magnetic, you're charismatic, people are going to react to that. People say, oh my gosh, you can just feel the magnetism of this person. But if you feel like you are someone who's ignored, not cared about, your friends don't include you, you're going to shrink yourself, because that is your identity that you hold. There are natural behaviors that come based on the identity that you have, right? So when you repeatedly return to a feeling or a thought, and you start to shift your identity to embrace this version of yourself, then what ends up happening is that your behaviors and your actions and the ways that you talk to yourself and the ways that you look at the world starts to naturally shift. So when Neville talks a lot about, hey, you don't actually have to take any action, I believe this is why. It's because it's going to naturally happen for you anyways as you shift your identity. There's nothing that you have to purposely try to do in order to get there. Now you can start to shift your habits, the behaviors that you keep, because each and every day, the habits that you have every day are confirming the person that you are. So if you don't really enjoy the life that you're leading yesterday, but today you wake up and you continue to have the same habits that you did yesterday, you're confirming to yourself that you are this person. This is your identity. This is the way that you're going to be. And that's why I love James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, because James Clear talks about the ways to actually change these habits, how to make new habits within your day using what you already have so that you can replace some of these bad habits with the new, better ones. I'm going to read this directly from Atomic Habits. He says, your habits are modern day solutions to ancient desires, new versions of old vices. The underlying motives behind human behavior remain the same. The specific habits we perform differ based on the period of history. Here's the powerful part. There are many different ways to address the same underlying motive. One person might learn to reduce stress by smoking a cigarette. Another person learns to ease their anxiety by going for a run. Your current habits are not necessarily the best way to solve the problems you face. They are just the method you learn to use. Once you associate a solution with the problem you need to solve, you keep coming back to it. Habits are all about associations. These associations determine whether we predict a habit to be worth repeating or not. Your brain is continually absorbing information and noticing cues in the environment. Every time you perceive a cue, your brain runs a simulation to make a prediction about what to do in the next moment. This all happens in an instant, but it plays a crucial role in your habits because every action is preceded by a prediction. So if we talk about habits, right, you have a cue, like a trigger, that goes into a routine and then you get some sort of reward. So James had mentioned smoking, right? So when somebody picks up a smoking habit, there is a cue. Either they feel stressed out, it's when they get in their car, there's some sort of cue, and they go into the routine of smoking the cigarette and they get the reward of the chemical release. So let's say that you're trying to find love in your life and you have found that your cue is that you miss your ex. It could be for any kind of reason. Either you saw somebody wearing a hat that they used to have, you walked by somebody wearing the same kind of cologne, you went to get into bed and you remember that they're not there anymore. Now, one, please remember that a lot of times our brain likes to go over the things that we miss instead of the reasons why they're an ex. But we'll talk about that in a different episode. But so you have this cue of you miss them. Your routine then is to go grab your phone and check their Instagram to see if they're out with somebody new. Your reward is either the confirmation that you were right, they're out with somebody new, or the confirmation that you were wrong and you can rest assured. You're also giving yourself this fake sense of connectivity to that person. And you sometimes have to figure out why you continue to go to this routine, right? Like, why are you self-sabotaging to the reason that you just continue to go back to looking at their Instagram or whatever kind of social platform you're looking at, or that you're sending them some long text message professing your love. But your brain starts to make those connections. When we feel this way, we're going to behave this way. And that's why changing your identity starts with changing your habits and your routines, or your habits and your routines change as you shift your identity. If you identify as someone who is completely over their ex and happy that they're gone, you don't look them up on social media. You don't check in on them. You don't send them text messages. You're thankful to be who you are without them. So Atomic Habits continues to say you are endlessly predicting what will happen in the next moment. Our behavior is heavily dependent on these predictions. Put another way, our behavior is heavily dependent on how we interpret the events that happen to us, not necessarily the objective reality of the events themselves. Two people can look at the same cigarette and one feels the urge to smoke while the other is repulsed by the smell. And so this is how this is tying back to our perceptions. The life events that you have, the filter that you have, is determining how you're going to react to that cigarette when you see it, or to the smell of smoke. I'm completely repulsed by the smell of smoke. but I used to be a smoker. And it sounds weird to even say that out loud. Like, I kind of don't even like talking about it because it grosses me out now. But now the smell of smoke completely repulses me, whereas before that cue would have probably triggered me to want a cigarette as well. A little further down on the same chapter is that he says, desire is the difference between where you are now and where you want to be. In the future, even the tiniest action is tinged with the motivation to feel differently than you do in the moment. When you binge eat or light up or browse social media, what you really want is not a potato chip or a cigarette or a bunch of likes. What you really want is to feel different. Our feelings and emotions tell us whether to hold steady in our current state or to make a change. They help us decide the best course of action. Neurologists have discovered that when emotions and feelings are impaired, we actually lose the ability to make decisions. We have no signal of what to pursue and what to avoid. It is the emotion that allows you to mark things as good, bad, or indifferent. And here's how we go back to your feelings and your emotional intelligence and regulation. The more that you're able to take a step back, create some space, and really consider the way that you're feeling, consider the way that you want to react instead of just reacting, allows you to have enough time and space to make a choice in your reaction. To really understand it, to become curious, to understand that part of yourself that is maybe having a reaction that you would prefer not to have. Whether you're acting out in anger or you're feeling extreme jealousy or even illness, right? Like sick to your stomach, you feel like you've been punched in the gut. And it's okay to feel those right away, right? We don't control our feelings. We control what we do with them. So when you have that feeling, can you learn how to take a step back? Take a moment, calm yourself, and then look at the event as neutral and make an actual conscious decision of how you're going to assign meaning to it. And this goes beyond even things that maybe are like external ways that people victimize you or act towards you, and things that you do during your day, right? So actually part of what Atomic Habits talked about is shifting your perception from I have to do something to I get to do something. This is such a small shift in your mindset that creates immense change. I can promise you it is remarkable what it changes. But if you think about the fact of I have to go to the gym, I have to get 10,000 steps today, I have to go to work, I have to finish this PowerPoint, I have to cook dinner for my family, I have to do the laundry. And instead, you start to just shift your mindset and the words that you're using, so the feelings that you're using around that event. It's instead, I get to go to the gym. My body actually works. This is freaking amazing. Like, I can still get up and walk. I get to hit 10,000 steps today because my legs work, because I feel good. I get to do this. I get to cook my family dinner and sit down and eat with them and hear about how their day was. And you can include other people, right? You can set up a habit within your own family for them to be included in the cooking of the dinner if you feel like you're always kind of dumped on to do that yourself. But you start to shift your experiences from I have to do this thing, blah, to I get to do this thing. I get to experience this. And it's amazing because the world is amazing. There's so much for us to experience. So that is another really remarkable book that I just absolutely love. I love the message in it. And James actually puts out a lot of information on how to change your habits, the ways that you can kind of incorporate it into your day. He talks a lot about habit stacking, getting 1% better, keystone habits. It's really phenomenal. I think when I do another episode like this, I'll also talk about the power of habit, which I also absolutely love. That one got me started. So I don't want you to think these are the only books that I would recommend. I just figured I didn't need to do an 8-hour episode on books. And that's going to bring me to Dr. Edith Eger's book, The Gift. It is absolutely remarkable. I actually think this book plus her book, The Choice, should be required reading for all. It is a remarkable story. She is a remarkable human being, and her message is just so beautiful and so enlightening. So she is a Holocaust survivor. When she was 16 years old, she was taken with her family to a concentration camp, and in The Choice, Embrace the Possible, she shares a lot of that story. And she also shares her story of after, right? So what happened after they were liberated? And to think that liberation came with just like this really celebrated life, it's just not the way it worked, right? And she talks a lot about being victimized and how she was treated and some really, really horrific stories, but it is a phenomenal book. And the message within it is the things that we're actually able to overcome, and that no one can take what's in your mind. Right? No matter what anybody does to you, you have what's in your mind. That's what you have control over. And the gift kind of continues on that same thread and talks about these life lessons. And these life lessons are absolutely phenomenal. She has each chapter broken up. So it talks about a life lesson. And like I said, the version I have has 12 life lessons. The new one looks like it has 14. I have not read those 2 extra chapters yet, but I cannot wait to. Some of my favorite quotes in the book start with, "Change is about interrupting the habits and patterns that no longer serve us." If you want to meaningfully alter your life, you don't simply abandon a dysfunctional habit or belief, you replace it with a healthy one. You choose what you're moving forward. As you find an arrow and follow it, as you begin your journey, it's important to reflect not only on what you'd like to be free from, but on what you want to be free to do or become. When you change your life, it's to become the real you. She says, "I like to remind my patients, the opposite of depression is expression. What comes out of you doesn't make you sick. What stays in there does." So it was really interesting to me as I was going back. I have this book completely marked up with tabs because I wanted to go back to so many parts of it and just remember pieces to share. And what I loved is that her book does, and it gives you exercises as well. I want to add that in there. So that's one thing that I love, is at the end of every chapter, she gives you some things to consider and exercises that you can use in your own life. But it also connects back to Sarah's book, where it's like you have to learn how to express your emotions, and you can do those in a healthy way. You can set boundaries. You can set habits for yourself that are healthy and contribute to the life that you want to lead. You don't actually have to ignore these things, because the more that you ignore them and you try to suppress them, the more that you're going to make yourself sick. You can't hold on to that stuff. You need to learn how to express it in a very healthy way and how to let it go so that you process it and you can move on in your life. Holding on to those feelings that you don't want to feel, ignoring them and trying to push them down, does nothing good for you. You may see this start to express itself and manifest itself in the way that you live, in the way that you're feeling, in the way that you have tension in your own body, the way that you're reacting to these external events. And that's why it's so important to learn how to express the way that you feel. And so as I was looking at all of these books, I'm like, oh my gosh, they all connect to each other. Sarah tells you how to understand your own parts, how to set up healthy boundaries and understand what a healthy boundary actually is, because it's not about controlling somebody else, right? It's about finding out the ways that you can work together, even if that means I have to say goodbye to you. It doesn't have to be in a hateful or spiteful way. Then James Clear teaches you how to actually change the habits that you're maintaining. What are not serving you? How can you update your habits to be more aligned to the type of person that you want to be? Neville teaches us that we're only going to express that which we assume true of ourselves, that we actually feel true, not the feelings that we're denying, like what Dr. Edith says. We're not denying these feelings. We're actually expressing them. We're understanding how to process them, how to no longer see ourselves as a victim and instead bloom into this real self, become the real version of us. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, definitely, if you're listening on YouTube, leave them down below. You can always shoot me an email. I love hearing from you. I will probably do more episodes like this. I actually feel like I cut quite a bit out of this, so it would not be too long. But I just find all of these books absolutely remarkable. They've all touched my heart. They've made changes in my life that is nothing beyond amazingly positive and taught me how to express more of who I am, how to step into being my authentic self. Because the more that I am my authentic self, the happier I am, the more fulfilled I am, the better I feel. And I want that for all of you. So I hope you have an absolutely beautiful week. If you want to email me, it's unleashinghappiness@ceciliahendricks.com. You can leave comments down below, but otherwise, just have a beautiful, beautiful week. And I wish you nothing but the best.